Cheers. Thank you ever so much, Dave. And my name's Jonny. I'm a grateful member of Cocaine Anonymous. And thanks, Dave, for asking me to share. And my nut's been doing one on me all day, thinking, how can I get out of this? How can I sort of tell a load of lies to get out of, to carry the message to the new person and the old timer in the room of, 12 years ago today, my friend, I've grown up with and used with for most of my life, hung itself, through untreated drug addiction and alcoholism. So I'm just going to have a few moments silence just to remember how the severity of this illness that tells you ain't got one. Thank you. So I'm going to start at the start, through working through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, directed out of the book and taking the actions, I've recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body. My experience of not working the steps ends me up using, and this what happens. I'm a little bit in now. I come into Cocaine Anonymous completely broken internally. My external sort of stuff outside of me, my personalities of how I become the actor to use, how I show and how I do to make everything look okay when it's not. Because I died in the rooms of Cocaine Anonymous for many, many, many years, sitting there, completely consumed with me, internally struggling, but couldn't have the sort of courage to ask for a bit of help or be honest. I'm just going to identify myself as being the real deal, hopeless drug addict. You know what I mean? Like, my experience starts before I even take a drink or drug. I had this stuff going on from a child. I was abandoned, as a child. I was my mum ran off and left me when I was about 2, and left me with my dad. It doesn't make me a drug addict, but what happens is how I deal with a certain situation that happens, and I'll put it inside myself and I'll carry it for many, many years. And I had that like irritable, restless and discontented stuff going on as a child. I was never happy or content with anything. I was very obsessive, so like when I lived with my nan, I'd go to school and I'd obsess about football stickers. You know what I mean? I was writing the football stickers and I'd obsess about them. And what I'd do is I'd go and chaw money out of my old man's pockets. So Sunday night, he'd come in from the boozer, I'd hear him snoring and I'd be thinking, stickers, stickers. I'll be crawling up the stairs. My mind would be going, you know what will happen if he catches you? He's going to beat you. Stickers, stickers. Yeah. And then I'll go up there and I'll rifle his pockets and I'll get a couple of quid and I'll think, wow, yes, stickers tomorrow. And I'd get the stickers and they didn't have Gary Lineker in. So I'd have to go again. I was, as a child, I was in and out of children's homes. A lot of trauma happened. A lot of stuff happened. That's when I first started taking substances. I was in a full care order for many, many years and a lot of bad stuff happened. And that doesn't make me a drug addict. I started taking a bit of a Tipex thinner. That was the first sort of thing, sitting in the back of the motor on the old sleeve. And that was it. That gave me ease and comfort. That was the ease and comfort I've been looking for all of my life. Because I used to wonder why people can do life. And I couldn't, because I reacted to life in the way of anger. And I couldn't deal with anything mentally and emotionally. I'm going to fast forward the tape and I'm going to identify as this. Do you know what I mean? I use substances and I can't stop from using them. You know what I mean? I've done the substances I didn't want to do. You know, when I found heroin and crack cocaine and benzos, that gave me the comfort that I was seeking. When I first took heroin, it gave me the comfort, you know, and I couldn't stop from taking it. You know, I went in and out of institutions for many, many years. You know, I come out and this is what happens to me. Before I get out, my mind goes like this. It goes, you know what? You need to just go back raving again, mate, because they were the best days of your life. You know, so what happens is this. I'll get to reception. My mind goes, just have a few, mate. A few Stella Artois. Yeah. I gets out, has a few Stella Artois, and I'll break out in crack houses. You know, and thus is another debauch into the allergy. And when I start, I can't stop. You know, no consequence will keep me clean. You know, I have problems in life. I have a baby with a lady. You know, find out the baby ain't mine. How do I deal with that? You know, I'll go to having it to kill myself. And I can't stop. I'm hopeless. I goes back in again. Gets clean. With a bit of hope this time that I'm never going to use again. And I comes out and I does exactly the same thing again. Another trip to the asylum or institution. You know, and the consequences, I'll become an RV heroin user. You know, going in my groin. I wake up on 2.5 pints of blood. I stop the bleeding. Yeah, this is where God come in. I stop the bleeding and have another hit. 3 days later, something came to my conscience. You need to go to the hospital, mate. I went to the hospital. Got to the hospital, didn't want to be there, just wanted to use. You know, sat down in the bed, took my clothes off and my main artery burst. Did that consequence stop me? No. You know, because I carried on and on and on. I got out again. I carried on and on and on and on. Light's gone off. Fuck's sake. Sorry, did swear. Excuse me. Yeah. And, you know, God came to me. God came to me and saved my life. But I turned my back. You know when you got no faith, you know what I mean? But something's there, but you're blocked off from it. You know what I mean? Because the obsession, all I could think about was using. You know, last time I gets put away. And I finds a program in the prison, you know, and I was hopeless. I was broken. I was broken within. This is the time that I can really feel surrender within inside my body. Even though the big book don't say about surrender, it says abandoned, which is exactly the same word, meaning to give up. Yeah, to surrender, to relinquish. You know, I was done internally. You know, I couldn't connect to anything. I was disconnected from life, like I felt many, many times as a child, or when I get clean and sober, it doesn't get better for me. And then I'm disconnected from that mentally and emotionally to life, to be connected. You know, and I met this lady. She see something in me. You know, she got me a bit of treatment down in Bournemouth. You know, I'm 31 years of age. And I goes down there and I bumps into my mate who works at the treatment centre. You know, I used to smoke crack cocaine with. And he gave me a bit of hope. You know, I went to meetings. You know, I'd sit at the back, completely consumed with fear, you know, and anxiety, you know, and I couldn't really speak to anyone. I'd look at the floor and I just couldn't even connect with anything. But that gave me a bit of hope. You know what they were saying? You know, you can recover. If you follow what we do, outlined in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, you will recover. But you lot will. But for me, there's no hope, because my hopelessness comes from in with my mind, and I can't stop from using clean and sober. I use again. I believe the lie within my mind, which tells me, because it says it in the book, and a delusion or an illusion, which is a lie. Every time I come out or get clean and sober, I believe something within my mind, that it's going to be different this time, even though I know it's not, because my past experiences show me it's not going to be different. But I still do it anyway, because it tells me, doesn't it? Can't bring into sufficient false consciousness within my mind to enough power and defense against the first drink or drug. Yeah. So I gets to this Bournemouth and I listens to this fella, and I wanted what he had, but I was too scared to ask him, but I asked him, can you help me? Because I'm dying inside. And he helped me. He said, are you willing to go to any lengths for victory over this illness? I said, yes. He gave me a bit of paper and it said, pray in the morning, read your book, get to 3 meetings, get there early, leave there late, phone me bang on 6 o'clock, get home group, get another commitment in another group. And I thought, this geezer's off his nut. He's giving me a bit of paper. Don't he know I'm a fucking thoroughbred lunatic drug addict who can't stop using? You've given me a bit of paper, mate. But he met up with me and he didn't call himself a sponsor, see? He called himself another drug addict. He said to me, you're going to help me more than I'm going to help you, mate. Yeah? And he lovingly showed me through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I unblocked all of that stuff. You know what I mean? It was quite irrelevant, around step 1, around being maladjusted to life. In the doctor's opinion, it tells me what the problem is. I am maladjusted to life. He said, what happens to you, John, when you have a problem, mate? I said, I use, mate. Any resentment, what happens to you, mate? I use, yeah? And then it's all their fault. And he said, this is what maladjusted means. I can't deal with a social situation mentally or physically. Yeah? So you use on something that happens externally. So drinking drugs is just a symptom to my problem. So he said, you've got to unblock to get some power, mate. Have you got any power? I said, no, I'm hopeless. Show me. I have no power. Yeah, to deal with the maladjustment of life. And I'll get irritable and restless and discontent. I'm never happy with what I've got in life. Never. But what gives me that ease and comfort is taking gear. So he showed me through the solution lovingly. I got to step 9 and I had to come back to Portsmouth. He sent me back every 2 weeks to make 5 amenses. I went back into the shops because he was direct out the book, direct. You go back and you pay back all the money. I went, whoa, I ain't got no money, mate. I'm on a scratcher. You know what I mean? But he made me go back. He said, you save £10 out of your money and go back. And my life changed. My thinking started to change at step 9. This is where the power and the change come. You know what I mean? I felt a bit of ease and comfort. I can remember, feeling that ease and comfort. I felt that ease and comfort at step 9. But what happened is this, I went through the steps. I got involved with Cocaine Anonymous. I moved back to Portsmouth. I was 10 and a half years sober. Do you know what I mean? And I started working the steps backwards. You know what I mean? It was in COVID times. And I used to come on this meeting ages ago. And it was in COVID times. I started working the steps backwards. You know what I mean? I ended up having a health issue and ended up getting addicted to codeine. You know, and then the mind went. I started working the steps backwards and wasn't carrying the message. I wasn't doing no prayer and meditation. Yeah, I was looking at everyone else. I was causing harm. You know, I was in character defects where I could not get honest with anyone else. You know, my will became permanent to actually doing what I wanted to do. You know, and then what happened is the thought came back and I didn't have no power. I lost defense against the first one. And I ended up going, the mind went, I'll tell you what, you're addicted now to these coding. You might as well have yourself a bit of gear, mate. And I went and had this bit of gear, you know. And once I had that bit of gear, I could not stop. I couldn't stop for 6 months. But God worked again. And this is what happened. My mate, who I sponsored many, many years ago, paid for me to go to rehab. You know, I was living with him. He paid for me to go to treatment. I went to treatment and I've done a detox. You know, I come out of there clucking. I stayed in Bournemouth and went through the steps in 2 days and then came back to Portsmouth. You know, and got straight back into the book online because we were still in COVID. How long have I got left? 10 minutes.
Yeah, 5, 10.
5 minutes is fine. I come back to Portsmouth and got straight back into it. You know what I mean? I was straight back out to step 9 and that experience showed me, do you know what I mean? That I lacked power. I lacked faith. I lacked the defects of character that kept me there. You know, at the time, present moment, right about now, you know, I'm in service. You know, what this program has given me through working through the 12 steps outlined in the book is ease and comfort. Externally, my life's okay. I don't need money. I don't need property. I don't need nothing. And the light's gone off again. There we go. You know, it's gave me the peace and ease and comfort that nothing in this world's ever given me. You know, I'm in service. Service is a big thing for me. You know, I like to do things without any acknowledgement. You know, if you are one of them people sat in the rooms of Cocaine Anonymous and you're dying inside yourself, like I was, yeah, you know, and couldn't get honest. I couldn't get honest. You know, I was 10.5 years of sobriety, loads of meetings I set up in Portsmouth, H&R subcommittees. You know what I mean? My ego would not let me go, do you know what? I fucking need a bit of help, mate. I need a bit of help. That's what my ego, you know, dresses itself up. This illness is progressive. You know, I have to work a step 1 still today. 2, 3, and live in the solution of 10 and 11, 12. You know, and I work with others. You know, I'm going to leave it on this. If you want what we have and you do what we do, you're going to get what we get. That's 100,000,000%. If you're struggling, but your conscience is telling you need to reach out for a bit of help, it's telling you something. Because our understanding of what God is was this. You know, God was drinking drugs for me. But when I unblocked to a conscious contact with God, my own conception, to gain an access of power beyond me, a loving God, not a criticizing, punishing God. You know, thanks, Dave, for inviting me, mate. And I'll leave it there.